Rowie and Bone.
Both teams played hard, and as long as it stays on the field, I'm happy with that.
Weekday afternoons from 4 on 1395. Adelaide's 5AA.
Interactive radio. Email on air at 5AA.com.au. Peter Godfrey.
It is 18 minutes past 5 now. A couple of texts here. Alexi says, just on, well, we've kind of got on scary movies now. Christine was mentioned before. Christine was a scary movie, Alexi says, as was Stephen King's It. But the one called The Descent is super freaky scary. Okay, haven't seen that one. Thank you for that. 8223 0000 is the number to call if you want to join in the conversation, although we're getting short of time. We've got Selwyn Manning to talk to first, though, in New Zealand. How are you, Selwyn?
Yeah, very good, Peter. How are things over there?
Good. You've recently seen Jewel as well, have you?
Yeah, a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was just saying to you offline that, you could just about smell the perspiration of Dennis Weaver.
Oh, yeah.
The stress levels.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes you'd be driving over the highways in isolated spots over here across ditching in New Zealand, and you might be getting pushed along by a truck, and you're thinking about Jewel all the way, and Dennis Weaver looking into that rear vision mirror and going, what the?
Yeah. Or pulling up at a level crossing with a train going by and just going, I hope there's no truck behind me, looking in your mirror repeatedly in case there's a truck there.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, scary stuff. Actually, just the truck driver you never saw, just Googling a couple of things about it, about Jewel, the movie. Kerry Lofton was the name of the guy that was actually driving the truck. He was both an actor and a stuntman.
Because you often forget him, because all you saw is his boots.
His boots and his arm out the window, yeah. That was it, but that was his name, Kerry Lofton.
Kerry Lofton, eh? You mentioned scary movies. I reckon that scariest movie of all time, I saw it when I was a very young teenager, was The Exorcist. It was an R18 at the time, so I shouldn't have seen it really. But,
no, you snuck in.
Whoa, what a creepy movie.
That's on a lot of people's top 5 list of the scary movies. Absolutely. Let's get on to some news, shall we, from your part of the world. Now, the issue of whether Kiwis living in Australia are treated as well as Aussies living in New Zealand been brought here. John Key's sort of pushed this a bit before, hasn't he? And without success. But your opposition leader David Cunliffe's been in Sydney talking about it.
Yeah, David Cunliffe, he's spoken to, he made a speech yesterday in Sydney to the Australian-New Zealand Leadership Forum, a group, obviously, people interested in the closer economic relations and the bilateral relationships between Australia and New Zealand. Now, this issue about equality, if you like, Peter, I thought, it's a good one to raise on your program. It's been getting a lot of publicity in recent years, particularly in the last 12 months. There's a lot of TV programs on this, and what it's doing is really examining what the long-term life quality is for Kiwis that it made the decision to go and work in Australia, commit to Australia, wanting to become citizens in Australia, etc., and what that's meant for them. Now, a lot of the problems have been highlighted by David Cunliffe. Now, David Cunliffe is the New Zealand Labor Party's new leader, really quite a dynamic guy, really, picking up this thing and running with it, with this new leadership, and he is saying that the inequality is evidence here. He's saying that, for example, Australians studying in New Zealand, they can access New Zealand's student support payments after 2 years of being here, while New Zealanders, he says, quoting here, studying in Australia cannot access equivalent Commonwealth payments at all. And what's come through in the news is things like this law change came in under John Howard in Australia in 2001. Kiwis that moved over to Australia after that time, even if they've committed for all of that time, so to say 12 years, in some cases even their children are not, that are Australians, but are not eligible to access some of the assistance and education programs that their New Zealand counterparts or Aussies over here would be able to. So there are all sorts of things. For example, David Cunliffe says New Zealanders living in Australia, they must pay the public disability insurance, but most cannot access it, even if they become disabled. He's saying Australians living in New Zealand pay into our ACC system and can access it if the need arises. So it's an issue that certainly he's captured a mood in New Zealand where we're starting to look at these types of things and really reflect on whether or not there is a growing view across in Australia, where Anzac Day, for example, is celebrated, but institutionally and through government policy, Kiwis are given the cold shoulder even when they've committed long-term to Australia's prosperity in those ways.
This came up prior to our election. I think Russell Crowe, we proudly tout him as an Aussie, but of course he's a Kiwi born in New Zealand, and I think he made some comments prior to the election about voting and the fact that he, wasn't able to vote because he wasn't born here, and so sort of highlighting the some discrepancies. So that's another area where Kiwis, who and in his case he's lived here most of his life, but he still wasn't entitled to vote.
What we're most sensitive to over here too, he's the brother of famous New Zealand cricketer cousin of Martin Crowe, famous New Zealand cricketer as well. But over here, what New Zealanders are sensitive to is that there's this growing view, if you like, or stereotype of Kiwis over in Australia being dole bludgers, etc., etc.
Yeah.
When the reality is quite different from what we're seeing. If you look at the facts and the figures, it shows that usually the Kiwis are highly skilled and got good tertiary qualifications, etc. So Kiwis have been, I suppose, in raising it with Aussies, have been a bit reticent to do so because of that stigma. They think, or the Aussies just see us as bludgers, etc., etc. But particularly, for example, like underscored in that issue that came up in the New Zealand news media about a year ago, where children of Kiwis that had moved over there at that time were having to repatriate back to New Zealand when even their children that were born in Australia who had severe disability were getting basically excluded from any support and encouraged to go back to New Zealand. So it's an important one, and we can see perhaps, and it might be brash of myself to suggest, but there's a mood here that see it as the policies that came out of the Pauline Hanson period of politics.
Okay,
back in the 2000s, that are basically not doing the same. For example, closer economic relations with New Zealand, that's a policy where trade between the two countries is facilitated and on an equal basis. Then we've got, clear rights of entry into Australia and to settle in Australia. The Australians have got the same back here, etc., etc., but in this policy area. It's an interesting one. And,
indeed. How was David Cunliffe's speech received? Was there any support from Australia or at the meeting that he was at?
There seemed to be support at the meeting that he spoke at, and remember that the meeting was a leadership forum where they're facilitating economic barriers to be pushed out of the way that it may exist in the regulatory structures. But getting back to the response, like Australian, in the New Zealand Herald newspaper, the biggest one here in New Zealand this morning, and it's underscoring the fact that Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has said, and I'm quoting here, that his government was unlikely to remove discrimination against expatriate Kiwis. So the Prime Minister here, John Key, has raised it, but the mood is that he raised it only in passing with Julia Gillard, Kevin Rudd, and probably, we think, with Tony Abbott, but really not committed to driving it through, because he would make a lot of noise here in New Zealand saying, we're going to do it, but he would come out of the meeting and basically try to, wet it down, if you like. And whereas David Cunliffe is saying, right, this is an issue, New Zealanders are not happy with that, I'm going to be positioning for Prime Minister of New Zealand, and I'm going to take those issues on full on.
All right. On to another issue where perhaps there's not going to be any equality. The Rugby League World Cup final coming up, Australia and New Zealand. Well, you guys, All Blacks, have been doing pretty well in rugby.
Stage.
Yeah.
So just noting here, just spouting off, I suppose, is another way of putting it, that the All Blacks unbeaten again this year with 14 international games and beat all of those opponents, including Australia, Springboks and England, etc., etc. Now, the Irish nearly broke a 108-year tradition by almost beating the All Blacks last weekend, or on Monday, our time, but just missed out. But this World Cup final for Rugby League going on up in the Northern Hemisphere, Peter. Australia, obviously, standout type favourites here, but the Kiwis reckon they might just be able to do it. Now, the last time Kiwis beat Australia was in 1998 in Auckland at North Harbour Stadium. Can they do it? Well, let's see.
We'll have to wait and see on that one. All right, all's fair in love and war and Rugby League World Cup finals.
It'll be a gruelling match.
May the best team win, Selwyn.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Have a great week, Selwyn. We will catch you again next week.
Okay, take care.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Selwyn in New Zealand. Head to livenews.co.nz for more news from New Zealand. Well, that winds up our early part of this Thursday morning. Thanks for your company right through these wee small hours. Anne Stone has all the latest news, sport and weather next. And then Leith Forrest takes you into breakfast with Keith Conlon and Jane Riley. Getting close to Keith's final day tomorrow morning. His final one with the big broadcast down at the Rotunda, down at Elder Park. It's going to be a day not to miss. So catch Keith and Jane after the news.